All right. So I think it's working now. All right. We're gonna test this mic out too. So and just keep in mind, so I mean like 55 million. 55 million. There's a significant number there because there's not only is that the number of the so-called visa people they have in the US, that's how hot it is in this garage right now. So it is 55 million degrees in the garage currently. So TikTok live, have fun, interesting, etc., etc. Will notify you. Okay, yeah, I mean, the thing is that TikTok does this little scrolly thing, and I've never really gotten used to it. So anyway, so I'll begin with this. So the last 3 weeks or so, and I'm just going to bring you up to speed. So anybody who may be tuning in and you're like you've been wondering like, well, where have you been, like how come you haven't been doing any live streams recently? Well, the last 3 weeks have been interesting to say the least. So like 3 weeks ago, what happened, I'm going to give you the short version. I'm not going to give you the long version, dude. Like 3 weeks ago I was working on the property because anybody who's been following me, I'm also building a house because I can't afford to buy a house, so I actually have to build one anyway. So I'm working out there on the property and taking down some trees, and I got out of the excavator, and I actually tripped over a log that I was trying to cut it, and then I tripped over another log, and one of the logs was covered in like poison ivy. Now I've never experienced poison ivy, but I hit my leg with it, and one of the veins like poked through the skin, and so it like injected all of this oil inside. It basically made my legs. No, this is like 4 days later. My leg like swole up to the size of my waist. It was ridiculous, and I'm like on the road at this point, right? So I'm not even in the state. I'm on the road driving, and I'm having to deal with all this on the road. So, and on top of that, because your immune system is trying to fight all this poison ivy, I also got sick on top of that. Which, dude, I don't get sick. The last time I got sick was, I want to say 2019 or something like that. It was like a long time ago. So I don't usually get sick, and so so temperature regulation, like everything was just messed up. And again, remember, I'm on the road this whole time doing this, and I'm having to deal with like road customer type stuff. Okay, so driving a truck and all that kind of, and like this is me having to deal with all this. And then I finally got back, and then went and tried to get some rest, but I'm still having to deal with all this stuff. And then finally went to the doctor who gave me an injection of steroids. And I've never had a steroid injection. So any of you out there, if you know, leave that alone, big kitty. This driveway kitty. So there's, hold on, come here. This is a driveway kitty. It's a random cat that appeared in the neighborhood one day. So anyway, so she's super happy, but she just comes up here and is doing random stuff. Anyway, not to bore you with this, but all that happened was that I got the steroid injection. No one told me it would keep me up for like 3 days. So it's like, dude, I don't usually do all this stuff, and I don't take pharmaceuticals a whole bunch. So for me to take this many pharmaceuticals just completely messed me up. Now, for the most part, back to normal. So welcome to everybody that's showing up. Let's see here. Grace from New York, welcome, welcome. There wasn't any other comments or something. What I was going to do, actually, and I ran out of time. I was going to like try and take a bunch of screenshots of questions that people had asked in the past that I hadn't been able to do that. And by the way, I hope the mic is working. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that stuff. I'm trying this new mic out to see if maybe you can hear me a bit better, and it's not as echoey. Anyway, so that was where this was all going. Hello to everybody who's joining. So I answered a few questions earlier today, one of which was just something that had been kind of bugging me, and that was the whole idea of this, like the party thing, the like, because I mean, other people bring this up. It's like the party thing of like the political parties, right? Because both parties have like sold out Americans a long time ago, and so my position on this has been really simple. It's like, dude, if anybody has a party affiliation, you shouldn't be voting for them. I would say just on its face, just the answer should be a hard no, because they clearly don't care about Americans or American people. Like, why would they? So that would be my take on that. And I did like a whole video on it. I posted it. I'm sure no one will see it, because as soon as I talk about if I mention even the word politics on my channel, it pretty much guarantees nobody sees it. It's weird how it works like that. Other people can get away with it, and they'll get like 600,000 likes. but because I don't clan and because I don't, if in other words, if I picked, like, let's say I was like a conservative, and I'm not, but let's say I picked a conservative side, I would get like tons of followers, and people would be like, yes, we love this conservative guy. I could say, oh, I'm a liberal, and I would get tons of liberals. But as soon as you have no party affiliation, or you start thinking along the lines of like common sense and getting away from the whole idea of left right, yeah, you're not liked by anybody. Everybody hates you. You just become like just toxic, because then you're able to think for yourself. And people who think for themselves are usually not liked by people who can't think for themselves. At least just what I've noticed. I mean, hey, what's your experience been? Because that's been my experience. My experience is the further I get away from any of these like these weird agendas that everybody has, the more toxic you become to all of their agendas, because you can see pretty much through all their crap. That's what I've noticed anyway. So, sounds fine. Good. Okay. Glad to hear somebody point out the mic. Yeah, that sounds good. So, is government? Let's see. This government is brainwashing Hollywood. This government is a brainwashing Hollywood. Yeah, I'd give you that. It's definitely that. To put it short, this government yeah, it is. It's all a bunch of crap nowadays. Now, I think most of it now is just pure entertainment. I don't know that there's really anything about what I'm seeing anyway. Just my personal take on it. I don't know that I'm seeing anything that is actually worth salvaging. With the, I'm not talking about the Constitution. I'm not talking about the Bill of Rights. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. That stuff's all very worth salvaging. That's all like foundational type stuff, and a lot of that isn't really even recent, right? I mean, like a lot of that stuff goes back into like before the time of Josh. I mean, that goes back like into the BCs. If you look at like where did the idea of a republic come from? Well, that actually came from the Athenian philosopher Solon. That's where that came from. Solon was the one who envisioned the idea of a fixed body of laws. In other words, the rules were supposed to be the same for everybody. So whether you were rich or whether you were poor, the rules are supposed to be the same. And that's the idea of a republic, a limited republic. And the Greeks thought that Solon was crazy. Well, of course they did. Of course they thought he was crazy, because they're like, well, that's going to take away all of our political power. And of course, nobody wants to have their power taken away from them, right? They're going to use that power for good, which never happens. They always end up screwing everybody. But in their mind, in their twisted mind, they're trying to help people. And even though they end up doing more damage than they do good. But no, I mean, Solon was the idea, said, hey, let's just create a fixed body of laws. And if you have a fixed body of laws that apply to everybody equally, then everybody knows the rules. And if everybody knows the rules, then, and they don't change, they're not like, hey, let's do a new rule so that way, because someone got rich, which is where laws come from, by the way. I don't know if you guys know this or not. Some of you are not, you may be new followers, but the people who've been around for a while, most laws come from somebody got rich and now they want to stay rich. And so the idea is create a law so that only I can do what I did to be rich and everybody else can't do that anymore. Or create a special tax or more regulation or something to where it makes it difficult for them to make any money and I get to make money really easily. Or it stems from somebody wants to get rich and they're not very good at anything. They don't really know how to do anything. They're like a third or fourth generation trust fund kid or a third or fourth generation welfare kid. They don't really have any creativity. And they're like, but I want to get rich. So let's make a law that says that only I can do something and I can make money off of it and everybody else can't do it. That's where like most laws come from. Most foundation of all laws come from that. So now we're not talking about laws in the capital L laws. In other words, like the laws of the planet, which is physics and conscience and things like that. Like those actual laws exist because, by virtue of existence on the planet, right? Like it's like gravity. You don't violate gravity. You never violate gravity. You confirm its existence. That's how gravity works. It's a constant. So Solon's idea was, let's create a body of laws that are like gravity. They don't change and they apply to everybody. Well, that's where the idea of a limited republic came from, way back, like thousands of years ago. So the Greeks ignored it. The Romans didn't. The Romans said, hey, this isn't a bad idea. Let's maybe institute this. This is a pretty cool idea that he's got going on here. So the Romans instituted the idea of a limited republic. And they created, I think, 12 laws, right? Want to keep it simple, right? It's got a beat. You can dance to it. Don't change it. They created like 12 laws. Seriously, not 80 million. 12. No Hammurabi nonsense. Okay, no U.S. Congress nonsense. Okay, where we've got laws for everything. We have so many laws. I don't even know how many laws they actually have anymore. It's an estimate, 80 million. Well, what they came up with, which was like 12, and something, I don't know. Sorry, TikTok. I don't know what they were asking me. Anyway, so they came, instead of having all these laws, they just had a few of them. Well, when you have very few laws, that means you leave everybody alone, right? Well, when people are left alone to do things that they want, well, then what do? They become very productive. That's what created the Roman Empire. No joke. That's the nascent beginning of the Roman Empire, was just regular people, not superheroes, not space aliens, none of that stuff, okay? It was just regular people, you, me, regular folks out here in the real world that started realizing, wait a minute, I can keep what I earn. My property is mine, and if I improve my property, I get to keep it. I don't have to like give it to the state. I don't have to give it to anybody else. I can keep it. And so therefore I can then be charitable at my discretion to people that I want to help, like voluntarily, because that's actually worth way more anyway, right? Put yourself in that position, right? Who would you rather help, or who would you rather be helped by? If you were being helped by somebody, would you rather be helped by somebody who genuinely wanted to help you because they thought that you were the end to itself? In other words, you weren't seen as a means to an end, because how are people typically seen, right? How do people treat each other right now, right? They treat them like a means to an end, right? Immanuel Kant, I think, was the philosopher who said that, like, what if you treated people like an end instead of the means? Well, think about that. I mean, like, how would you like to be treated? Like a means to an end, or like an actual person? Would you rather be talked to like a human being and treated like an individual person that you are? I know which one I would choose. I wouldn't want someone to help me because they're like, oh my God, I got to go help them. I wouldn't want to be helped by somebody like that. But somebody who shows up and says, you know what, I'm going to help you with this. I'm going to teach you something. Let me walk you through this. That's more valuable, right? So you're able to do that because you have abundance. It's way more valuable. So that's actually the nascent beginning of the whole Roman Empire, was just that whole idea. Now, of course, they lost their way because they created politicians. Then, of course, politicians become part of the so-called intelligentsia. And these types of positions have this really nasty habit of attracting the very worst people that exist on the planet. And I don't know why it is. And everybody notices it. They have it has this weird attraction to people who don't want to do anything in their life creatively or physically. They want to somehow be in charge of it, even though they've done nothing. They have no authority at all. They've never earned any authority. They have credentials. You've heard me talk about this recently if you followed my recent work. Credentials are what you purchase. Credentials are what you steal. Credentials are what you just give yourself. Authority is what you earn through time and patience and experience. That's where authority, like real authority, comes from. Well, positions of power, when they're created, unfortunately, they don't usually attract the people with authority. They tend, because people with authority aren't really usually, they're not interested in becoming super powerful because they know where that leads, right? Anybody who's achieved any power in their life knows that they want to treat it very delicately, because you don't want to do something that's going to cause much problems for people, especially years down the road. Well, that's what ends up happening. So the people who have authority are very hesitant to want to get into positions of so-called power. They don't really want to do that. They're more interested in maybe having a little influence, but they don't want to control people's lives. But there are control freak people out there that are like moths to a flame. They love that. They love the idea of, oh, I could be in power and I don't have to really actually do anything. I just get to be in power and I get to implement my ideas out into the world, as opposed to actually doing them in my own life and seeing if they actually work, right? And that's what it is. So that's how the Roman Empire basically, created. This is where you get the decline and fall of the Roman Empire by Gibbon, when he wrote I think it's 6 volumes. It's a lot of reading, and it's a brain buster. It's not easy read. It's not like reading Creature from Jekyll Island, which reads at like a 6th grade level. No. It's a brain buster to read those books. But I'm just pointing out that that's how you get the decline, the rise and decline of the Roman Empire. Not to bore you with that. Let me go back in here, and because I don't want to get too far behind on everybody. let's see here. History repeats itself. Tyranny always gets addressed. Yeah, it does eventually. And hopefully it gets addressed sooner rather than later, actually, especially as nowadays, at least in my opinion, because there's so many people now that are getting completely cut off of, they're dealing with reality, but there's so many people, remember we talk about this a lot here. We talk about the mass psychosis thing, and that's not an original idea of mine. You can go to Academy of Ideas and you can see that too, right there on YT. And where they talk about this. This is not an unknown problem. It's a known issue that once people get themselves to a certain point of unreality, they become so detached from everybody, and they just stop. They start thinking of themselves as gods, and everybody else is just a bunch of peons, and it creates just too big a gap. So it isn't just a wealth gap. It's actually a gap in mentality, where they're so far detached from like the reality of life that they can't even, they have nothing in common with any of the people that they're supposedly leading. Yeah, it's really a terrible thing. Can't stand the Congress, Senate. Yeah, I know, they're all disasters right now. You get a lot of bot comments? Probably. I'm sure I do. Yeah, on Birdsite, I spot the bots pretty fast there. Anymore nowadays, it's getting a lot easier to spot them because they usually just say a bunch of stupid stuff. You can kind of tell after a while who actually is asking a legit question versus just something like, your hair sucks. Like, dude, I just usually, if I look at a few of their comments and it's all something kind of similar to that, I just block it because I know it's a bot or one of those wall accounts where there's one guy just making comments on like random stuff and he's got like 600 phones in front of him. It's weird. Thoughts on U.S. experiencing depression era between now and 2030? We're already, I would argue, in a depression. That's already a thing. Personally, I think that already exists, given that the spending power, and this is just what they'll admit to. The current admission is that there's been 20% roughly inflation per year since 2020 to now. That's 100% inflation. That qualifies as hyperinflation, by the way. Technically speaking, according to all of the so-called economist books, that qualifies as hyperinflation. That's not quite Weimar Republic hyperinflation, but it qualifies. When you have prices going 100% in a span of 5 years, did anybody get a 100% raise? How many of you out there, seriously, you can chime in the comments. How many of you got 100% raise in the last 5 years? I would go so far as to say many people, not only did you not get a 100% raise, you probably took a pay cut, just like everybody else did. So you went backward in many cases. Now, not everybody. I realize, hashtag not everybody. I get it, right? Some people did have their incomes go up, but relative to the rest of the population, no, not even close. It's why I push the idea of $150 an hour minimum wage. I have the math that'll back all that up. And that isn't me espousing some nonsense about how, about idealism and everything. No. That's just me espousing the math and taking it through to its logical conclusion and wanting to collapse the dollar because it's a worthless currency, right? Raising minimum wage doesn't solve poverty. What it does do is it collapses the currency, and that's exactly what you want. That's sort of that's your turn the other cheek kind of thing, right? It's like you're forcing the logical conclusion of the collapse of the currency. You're not trying. You understand? You're trying to force the issue. You're not trying to solve the problem because the problem is unsolvable. You're trying to force the issue so the currency collapses so that we can actually get to the underlying root of the problem and then solve it from there and then go up and everything. But I would argue we're actually in a depression currently. Especially when you figure the not just the jobs market, but the fact that there is a fake jobs market, right? That's a thing. Imagine in the 1930s when there was a depression in the US, an actual so-called according to Hoyle depression, where they're never going to say depression again. They'll say recession, they'll say super recession. They'll come up with every crazy euphemism there is. Dude, it's a depression. And we've been in a depression probably for quite some time. I would say since COVID, we've been in a depression since then, pretty much. Well, there were no fake job listings, right, back in the 30s. There were, when you walked into a place and said, hey, are you hiring? They'd say, no, that's it. the place that what you wouldn't have in the 1930s. Imagine this, right? You walk into a place and say, "Hey, are you guys hiring? I got my shovel. I can dig ditches for you." And they're like, "Yeah, absolutely. Let's go and talk to our HR girl." And we'll set up like 7 different interviews and then ghost you on the 8th interview. Like, nowhere would that exist. No, so it's not only do we have a depression, we have a depression mixed with just endless amounts of scams, like endless cons of like it's not a depression because see, there's all these companies that are hiring, but they're not actually doing any hiring. They're just claiming that they're hiring, and in the meantime, they're just applying as fast as they can for H-1B status. They're just trying to get as many H-1Bs as they can and not hire Americans. I was so glad to see Elon get taken by an H-1B today. I've never been happier to see somebody get ripped off, and rightly so, as far as I'm concerned. And that's not because I dislike Elon, but because, frankly, he deserved that. Because, I mean, like, dude, come on. Now, an American could have ripped him off too, but at the same time, it's like, well, yeah, but I mean, dude, you know, it's like you're the one supporting all this crap. The average American doesn't. Average Americans, most Americans, I would really say this: most Americans just want a square deal. They just want a square deal. They want to show up to work at some place, not feel as though that they're being handed their hat every 2 minutes of the day, that they're gonna be like out of a job at any given moment of the day. I think most Americans, they like doing a good job. They like, being able to focus on their work, not focus on, am I going to be here tomorrow? So I hope that answers your question. Political theater, it is. Ever wonder why they will not update the electrical grid? I think they're broke, frankly. I mean, as someone who works in electric, the costs of the materials is crazy now. I mean, I deal with this stuff every day with my electrical staff, because I have a staff that we work with, and because and if anybody knows, I mean, I work in electricity. I work in the generator business. I'm the guy you call when the power goes out, and then the other power goes out. I'm the guy you call. And when I show up, it's like, dude, the costs for all these materials now are just insane. Particularly copper, and power companies aren't even using copper anymore. They're using aluminum now. They can't, none of them are using copper anymore. There's just no way they're using copper. It's like 3 times the price. They won't do it. But no, they won't update the any of that the grid stuff. I think the costs are just too high. It's one of the things. It's actually, I'm glad you brought this up, because it's actually been a pet peeve of mine. If you're going to have like a bunch of busy work FDR type make work type programs, like hire a guy to dig a ditch and hire another guy to fill it back up kind of thing, if you're going to do stuff like that, it just seems to me like, why wouldn't you, instead of building windmills, these bird blending windmills, these eyesores out in the farmlands, and building all these solar panels that just take up the countryside, like, rather than do something like that, why wouldn't you bury all these electric lines so that way storms don't knock out power as often? I mean, that just seems like that would be a better use of your money. If you're just going to blow billions of dollars, seems to be the better way to go about it. But they're not even doing that anymore. I mean, they're not even doing make-work programs anymore. There's no so-called shovel-ready Obama nonsense. They're not even doing any of that. They're not even trying to do any of that. So, they clearly don't care about this stuff. Let's see here. Something about gifter badges and everything. Whoever's giving me stuff, thank you. Whoever that was, I may have missed it and stuff, but it is appreciated, and I do try to comment on it when I get going here. Charity comes prosperity. Other ways of this tax, yeah, exactly. They're narcissists. Yeah, that's definitely one of the words. That's one of the words I would use. One of several, actually. Let's see here. Why is everything like so blindly transparent and such mass psychosis? Is it the technology? Well, the technology is helping. I mean, I would probably say it that way. I mean, we're able to see this stuff in real time, so it's not like you can, back in the old days for this Gen Xers out there that are watching this, assuming there's any I mean, most of you guys are probably in your like 20s or 30s or something like that. But I mean, for any of my older followers, or even some of the boomers that may do follow my live work, which is rare, but you'll remember there was a time that they could do what's called spin control at before it even hit the media, and they'd have like 3 or 4 days, some cases, to be able to spin something. They don't have that anymore. Now you've got like 5 seconds. to come up with an answer. That's why otherwise you have the Ted Cruz thing, the Ted Cruz interview live thing, where he just basically forgot all of his lines and ended up telling the truth. And yeah, that's what ends up happening. So, it's one of the reasons why I think that we're able to see so much of the mass psychosis that's going on currently within the political spectrum, because I mean, these guys are not that fast, and they're telling so many lies that at a certain point, no one has a good enough memory to be a successful liar, right? I don't know where I heard that from, but nobody has a good enough memory to be a successful liar. And when you start telling so many lies upon lies upon, when you start stacking them to the extent that we're seeing now out of all these people, there's no way to keep all of that straight, which is why they get caught all the time. Everything allowed to go except paychecks. Yeah, it's been a real problem. It's something that I've commented on quite. Actually, if you follow me, I've been commenting on this quite a bit. That everything, and this is actually the biggest problem I have with conservatives. This is why I hit the conservatives as hard as I do. I hit right all the time. Now my left hook is pretty devastating, but I hit right a lot, and it's because I hear these weird statements about how we have a free market, we have market this and market that. We have a market economy in everything except wages. That, for whatever reason, is totally exempt from the market principles of supply and demand. I don't know why, and I've never had any good explanations from anybody, because they don't want to explain it, because as soon as they explain it, they know I'm going to follow up with okay, well then let's have a free market there, and wages have to go up to about $150 an hour. That's the reality. Cracker Barrel, for example. We just saw this. I was just talking with a friend of mine about Cracker Barrel. I don't know if they're going to come back from this. I really, from a business standpoint, I don't know if they're going to come back from the disaster they created. They would have been better off focusing on the food, and focusing on getting people in to try new foods, and then they would have been better off hiring professional chefs, like really high-end professional chefs, and having come in and design some better recipes that are a bit more contemporary, and pay them for these recipes, and pay them for their time, pay them well, and come up with some really good ideas, and implement really good quality food at their restaurants, than mess with the rest of the restaurants. You'd be better off with that, and then promote the food aspect and get people in for the food. You're better off with that than what they did. What they did is going to be a disaster, and will probably go down in history, in the business annals of history, as a really huge disaster. I mean, we were even, as of yesterday, I think even Taco Bell has decided to bring back food from the 90s. They bring back the Cholito and so forth. It's that's how you do that. I mean, people are after that kind of stuff. Bring back the hut part of pizza, right? Bring that back, instead of doing, a bunch of gimmicks and everything. So, and I think that Cracker Barrel is going to really pay the price on this one. They may end up paying the ultimate price, business-wise, seriously, for what they've done. Again, because excuse me, because it just brought all the attention on the food. Yeah, you did all this other stuff, but dude, you didn't do anything with the food. And now it's coming out. I've been seeing videos of people hey, I used to work at Cracker Barrel. Here's what we used to do. Here's what they do now. It's all basically frozen, heat and serve, microwave crap. It's dude, you brought that on yourself. And you really should have spent more time on the food, but that's expensive. And you'd have to pay people more money to keep quality people in there to make the good food. I know what I'm talking about. I owned a restaurant, and I'm telling you, yeah, the days of getting somebody in there for $25-$30 an hour to make really good food, that's gone, dude. It's going to be more than that now. Now you're looking probably about $80 an hour to get somebody. I'm not joking about that, by the way. It's going to cost a lot now to get people in there to really make good food and stay on top of that, because making good food, it's basically a full-time plus job. Ask anybody who's a pro chef, and they're all going to tell you they think about food all the time. They're constantly thinking about what's proofing, they're always thinking about this stuff. They're thinking about what they need to prep the next day for the menu. They're always thinking about this kind of stuff. You're not going to get those guys for $20 an hour anymore. You're just not. You're not going to get those guys for $30 an hour. They're going to be a lot more money now, and it's just going to get worse because of what you've done to the economy. Right? Because you've printed money to worthlessness, and it's not the fault of the restaurant. Maybe it is. I mean, maybe, but it's the fault of the hedge funds that own all that keep insisting that they need to have more money printed. we get the same pay and everything else. Price goes, yeah, that's what I mean. It's going to keep going up. There's no choice but hyperinflation. Well, that's not true actually, and I've covered that a couple of times, but I'll cover really quickly. They can stave off hyperinflation, and you're not going to like it, but they can do it by importing more H-1Bs and H-2Bs and not exporting all of the illegals. It's truth. It's truth. They can stave it off for quite a while, actually, by doing that because of something called relative value of the currency. And this is a challenging thing. Some people don't understand this, but I'll try and walk you through it briefly here. Would you, as an American, so let me ask Americans here, so don't go anywhere, pay attention. If I told you you could move to some other country and you didn't have to care about the country, you didn't have to care about the people, you could do whatever you wanted there, you could drive drunk, mess up there, do a bunch of stuff I can't even say on TikTok. Would you move to that country and just act like a complete fool, but you're going to make like a whole bunch of money relative to your economy? Now, it's not going to be worth anything in their country, you know, but you should work there for 4, 5, 6, 7 years or so, just kind of suffer through it. But if you send all that money back to your country, when you come back, you have all this money and now you can build your dream home, you can live this really nice life, etc. Right? Most Americans would say, yeah, man, you mean I can go basically pillage another country and then come back and be rich? That's exactly what's being sold to all of the H-1Bs. And not kidding. You're on the receiving end of that, Americans. You're on the receiving end of that exact sales pitch. That's what's being told all these folks. Because the currency, because the US dollar buys more in their countries. It's one of the reasons why I've been trying to advocate for the idea of collapsing the dollar. Because if the dollar goes below the rupee, right, in terms of value, that doesn't hurt the American people. That just hurts all the people that are over here. That means that 55 million H-1Bs leave. And it means that basically all the illegals flee because they're like, okay, well, there's no reason to stay here. Yeah, that's what you want to have happen. You know, like, well, that'll destroy GDP. I don't care. Nobody cares about GDP. The only people who care about GDP is the orange, you know, what's his name? Fulsa Boomer. Actually, that's what I've been calling him now. Fulsa Boomer. You know, and his cult following of minion weirdos. They're the only people who care about that kind of stuff. The average American is not like benefited by that stuff at all. No, the average American, you know, wants to be able to own property in their own country, build their houses, have their houses, own property, and have some money and actually be able to live some kind of a life, not spend every waking moment of their existence trying to survive. you know, they get off of work of their job and they're like, oh, I got to get to my other job. And then when I'm done with that job, I have to go home to my other job. And then when I get done with that job, I got to go to my other job. And then I got to try and, you know, sleep at some point. That's American life today. And people are getting really tired of it. And it's not because of lack of work ethic. It's because, dude, it's called exhaustion. It's like saying, no, dude, come on, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, forget it. Let's see here. Our economy, our company CEO received about a 400% pay rate. Yeah, exactly. These are the kinds of ridiculous things that happen. These people all do these. They get these huge raises, and yeah, it never really makes it down to the people that are actually doing all the work. That's what ends up happening. Let's see here. Usury destabilizes society. It does, absolutely. It certainly can. It certainly can in the way that it's being implemented. No question about that, especially right now. There's no reason to do it, especially when you have a currency that is conjured from nothing. The US dollar is, in fact, a fiat currency that's conjured from nothing. There's really no reason to charge any interest on it because it has no intrinsic or mathematical value of any kind anyway. I like history. I like the idea of a revolt. I don't know why it seems that nothing happens. Is it because of the advanced tech? That's part of it. That's in my opinion. I can only give you my thought on that. And my opinion is it's because you do have advanced. The communication is really fast, and we have that advantage. But that communication can be shut off just like a light switch, as they've proven with people where they just unperson them from the internet. It's exactly how it works. It's why like 60% of the stuff that I ordinarily would talk about, I can't even talk about on TikTok. Like seriously, like 60%. In other words, so I can't even go into topics here, even on classic TikTok. Right? Even on the so-called uncontrolled TikTok of the day, back when it was owned by the Singaporean dude, like there's like 60, seriously, it's like 60 or 70% of the stuff, of topics that I can't even cover. I can't even talk about them because of algorithms. Yeah, it's a big problem. So, you know, that is an issue. But then also, it isn't. I don't think it's initially the advanced tech. It's in terms, again, militarily and everything, but it's a matter of like how do you make it work, because you've gotten rid of free speech for the most part, and then on top of that, the American people have been disarmed for so long. They have, like, well, but they still own enough to, like, deal with a couple of intruders on their property, but they don't own enough to actually be. It's the reason why cannons were talked about in the Second Amendment. Let's see here. Hello to you too. When we die, I just hope hop on board, believing it's. Well, we'll see. We'll see if that's the case. Love lay down suppressive fire video. People thought I was joking too. You know that? People thought I was joking. I was being dead serious. Every former employee will tell you that, like, dude, that was well known throughout the whole store. Everybody knew that was the rules. We never were robbed as a result of that. In another business long before that, I'll tell you, I have to tell the story carefully here because it's a live stream, but there was an ND that actually happened, and a piece of, like, the shrapnel, the copper jacketing went into someone's leg, and they were immediately talking about the hospital. I said, we are not doing GSW statistics, dude. That's not happening. I went and locked the door. I'm like, we're fixing that here, dude. This was a really good friend of mine too. I said, there's no way I'm taking you to the hospital and having that go down as a GSW stat. There's no, because then there'd be an investigation. Like, dude, no, we're not doing that. We're fixing this mob stale right here. So we did. But yeah, so all of that is actually 100% accurate. That story that I told, that's accurate. Everybody thought it was a joke. Like, I'm actually being serious. I'm not saying do dire crazy stuff because, let's see here, and be saved. Giant finger to the system. It would be. I don't know. I just talked about this recently. That I think that what we need to do is people just need. First of all, they need to get past the party system. They really do. People have got to get past the party system. I think that the not just the so-called two-party system, the party system in general is outlived its usefulness. It is completely dated. There is no reason to have it anymore. Like I said, and I've said this dozens of times here, and anybody who's ever followed any of my live stream work, you'll know that, like, dude, if a politician seriously can't do this, if somebody who's running for an office, they can't do this, they can't just turn the camera on and, like, talk to, like, actually engage with people, you should not be voting for them, period, under any circumstances. And I do mean that. Under any circumstances. If they can't do this, the answer should be no. It should be a hard no, categorically. Even if you like some other ideas, the answer should be no way, because that means they can't talk to you like a person. They can't address you and talk to you like a person or deal with some of the problems that you may be having. Now, there's no way, you can't be all things to all people. That's true, and you've heard me do that. Anybody out there who's, again, has followed my live work, somebody will ask a question and I'll say, I have no opinion because I got no answer for you, sorry. And I do that. Right? That is an answer, right? It's not an answer you wanted to hear, but it is an answer. And you should be able to do something like that. Thank you to whoever it is that just gave me something. But you get my point, right? So yeah, I mean, it should be a hard no. The party system should be 100% over. I think anybody under the age of, like, 55 at this point, it should be, like, burned into your brain right now. It should be like an old screen burn from your TV, where, like, back in the old days when it would burn into the screen, game over burns into the screen on the arcade games after a while. I think that should be just basically burned into your brain at this point. No party system, and if they can't do something like this and engage and talk to people without a script, without a bunch of handlers, without a bunch of people telling them what opinion they can have, dude, the answer should be 100% no. No way. You are 100% not even an option. That's really the attitude people are going to have. I mean, spread that around. If you spread anything around, spread that around, because that's actually what's needed right now. It's up to us to be loving, ethical people. Yeah, that's true. If we want to see a world like that, I agree. Yeah, remember, it just comes from being willing to treat people like an end instead of a means to an end. That's all it is. Now, we're not going to do that all the time. People aren't perfect, dude. Come on. Everybody's going to fail. There's no way to try and be perfect like that. So stop trying. But you at least try to remember it occasionally and think about it and put yourself into the person's position. Would you want to be treated like that? That's all it takes. Let's see here, the costs. We have thousands of bridges need to be repaired. Yeah, no kidding, we do. We have a lot going on. Thanks, bro. This country is wild. It is definitely a strange time. Is the orange still with us? Probably. I'm guessing. No one. Thulsa Boomer has not toppled his reign yet, and given us DJ Vance. See that makes so much sense. One of memories. Good enough. No one has a good enough memory to tell successful lies. That's not even mine, by the way. That was somebody else. I don't remember where I read that, but that was some philosopher said something like that. We have no free market. I agree. Let's see here, and see here. If benefits if it benefits the people, they do throw it down the toilet. That's right. Bankruptcy, literally Olive Garden is micro. It is. That's what I'm saying. Let's see here. You're right, brother. Physics. You have to. By the way, forgive me when I read this because it's really tiny print and it's hard for me to see it on this, and it's on a white background. So, anyway, need to import people to keep as an indicator. Keep crumbling the nation. Yeah, that's part of it. Also, there's multiple reasons for it, but the biggest one, and this is why I talk about it as the most, is that what it's doing is it's actually just taking. It's dropping the wages for Americans. It's making sure wages domestically don't come up. Remember that if your domestic wages come up, then what ends up happening is that Americans tend to start paying off debt. And when you pay off debt, that means that the money goes away. Makes sense? Because the dollar is a debt-based currency. So if you pay off debt, if average Americans pay off debt, then average Americans don't own any debt, which means that the banks own all the debt. And that's what they don't want. They want you in debt forever. That's this whole student loans thing, right? The student loan thing is just indentured servitude. It's just this century's version of indentured servitude. So back in the day, you know, how you got to America, you know, if you wanted to become an American or something, you want to leave the country you were at, you would sign an indentured servitude contract and jump on the boat and then go west, right? And you would owe however much money. Let's say it's, you know, I don't know, 10 ounces of gold or something. I don't know, whatever the number is. Okay, whatever the number is, it is. You owe this money now, and so you have to work for your employer to pay back this indentured servant contract that you signed. And let's say it took 5 years, for example. Okay, well, that was one thing. Today's indentured servitude is student loans, and today's indentured servitude of student loans is just perpetual, endless debt, where they fiddle with the interest rates. They change the way they calculate things. This is why you'll see these people that are like, hold on a second here. I signed a contract for a student loan that said this is a fixed. People that are like, hold on a second here. I signed a contract for a student loan that said this is a fixed interest rate loan of 3.5% or something like that. How exactly am I now paying 9.5%? And it's like, so you have people that are like, dude, they're really upset, and they have every right to be upset because it's like they thought that they were signing a contract for a fixed rate loan, and then they change the deal because the government says, well, you know, since we're the ones backing it and we feel we're losing money, so we're just going to change the deal on you. You know, I've altered the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further. Yeah, that gets really annoying for people. So that's what ends up happening with these kinds of indentured servitude type contracts, and that's all I see student loans nowadays. That's why I have the opinions that I do on student loans. I have full disclosure. Anybody who's followed my work, I have no student loans. I have never taken a student loan ever. I have never had student debt in my entire life. That said, I don't begrudge the people who did, and I don't begrudge the people who did and paid it all back. But at the same time, right now, it's not the same deal anymore, especially the way that they're treating people with it. Especially the way they're treating the young, particularly the young people, the way they're treating them with these student loans. What should be happening is people should be saying, we're not giving you anything. We're done. We're not giving you anything on these student loans until you figure this stuff out, because what you're doing is very destructive to the American people, particularly the young people. You also told, this is also a problem that boomers did. Every boomer told everybody to go out and get a bunch of crazy student loans. It was everywhere. I mean, you had kids being told from childhood that, yeah, go get student loans, go into all this debt, it'll be fine. Like, no, it's not going to be fine, because everybody went and did it. It's one thing if you're, let's say you're in a room of 100 job applicants and you have a degree in that specific field. The other 100, maybe 2 of them have some experience in that. So you may stand out. It is not the same thing when everybody shows up, when 60% of the room shows up with the exact same degree you have and the exact same amount of experience, and like you're no longer standing out anymore. You're just part of the unwashed masses again. And it was a problem that even I saw in the early 90s when I was told the same thing, because I got told that by every boomer too, dude. I'm no exception to the rule. I was told, oh, go to college. It's like, no, I don't know. And then when I was 16, I told the story a long time ago. I asked the question, what happens if everybody else does that? It's the question I asked when I was 16. And the answer I got was, that was the answer I got. Nothing. Just sort of a blank stare with really, that's all I got. It was a 100-yard stare because they clearly hadn't thought that through. So because I couldn't get an answer to that, I avoided the whole thing. That said, my solution to the student loan situation is actually very simple, and I've been very vocal about this. Every American should be sent $500,000. Just send every American $500,000. That's the solution to it. Send every American 500 grand, and you're like, well, that's just crazy. No, it's really not. Let me explain why. The people who have student loans can pay their student loans off with their $500,000. The people who already paid off their student loans, they don't get burned. They get a refund, basically. Because what happens when you do that whole Bidenomics thing where it's like, oh, we're going to forgive all these student loans, you realize you basically insulted everybody who paid off their student loans. You also insulted a bunch of people who like me, didn't go into the student loan thing. We stayed out of it. We said, hey, we're not going to be a part of this. So you end up screwing, whatever 2/3 of the population by saying we're going to forgive these people who went to a 4-year drinking contest and got a degree in whatever and got to party, for between 4 and 8 years. And now we're just going to forgive all that. No, the proper way to do that would be to send everybody $500,000. The people who still have student loans, they pay off their student loans. The people who already paid their student loans off, they get a reimbursement. The people who didn't do any of that, they get 500 grand to go blow it on whatever they want, or pay off their house, or do whatever they want to do. That would be the proper way to do that. Well, but that would wreck the economy. Do I look like I care about this fake economy? Come on. I mean, like, anybody, again, if you know me, if you know my work, even as an economist, I will tell you this is a fake economy. And I would point out to you, never, ever apply free market hard money principles to a captured fiat lie economy like we have right now. There's two different economies. One is completely fake. The other one is actually real. We don't have a real economy and haven't had one for quite some time. So to lose this madness and let so-called GDP and the fake stock market go to zero, the average American wouldn't even know what happened. It would only affect a handful of boomers, fake billionaires who constantly have to be photobombing everything because they have to hawk a product because they owe billions of dollars to somebody, typically the bankers, because they have no way to access that fake billions. They have to keep borrowing it, which creates even more problems and destroys the currency even more by doing so, because it puts more dollars into the economy that they weren't there before. And so it creates even more inflation. This is why you see this ridiculous wealth gap. And it's just going to get worse. It is not capitalism. It's just, dude, it's central banking. That's how central banking eventually, and every economy that tries central banking ends the same exact way. Whether it's capitalist, communist, fascist, national socialist, it doesn't matter. They're going to end the same. The outcome will eventually be the same. Let's see here. What about people? Thank you. What about people about to retire? Their 401ks probably get vanished. Yeah. I'm not sure what I don't mean that to be a mean. I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying that past performance is not indicative of future results. People can and do lose money. Investors understand that in every single 401k that you have ever signed, you listen to me. Anybody out there who happens to see this and you happen to see like, oh my God, he's talking about 401ks, I better pay attention. Yeah, pay attention, because every single 401k that you have ever signed up for, every one of them, it says, go find your paperwork and read it. It says somewhere in there, past performance is not indicative of future results. You as an investor do understand that you can lose every bloody penny that you put into this, and you have zero recourse to get any of it back, period. And there isn't a court in this world that will ever take your side. Nowhere. No, they can't. Because it says you understand that you are basically risking all of this money. This is not explained to people. They think 401k is a savings account. It is not. And I want to be very clear, it is not and has never been a savings account. It is absolutely 100% not a savings account. It is a gambling account, no different than if you went to Vegas and started, howdy, thank you, and you just started putting it all on like black, hoping that the marble will show up black instead of green or red. It's no different. It's the same thing. That's exactly how it, legally speaking, that is exactly how it's seen. And there isn't a court in this world that would side with you. It's going to say, did you sign this? It says here, you initialed. You probably had to initial. In fact, I think the last brokerage account that I opened, which was years ago, it's been a long time since I opened a brokerage account, but I've had like 6 of them in my lifetime. Yeah, like 6 of them in my lifetime. And I had to initial a thing that said specifically that I understood that all of this money can go away right now. And there is nothing you can do about it. So yeah, I mean, this is why I would tell anybody, be careful if you've got a bunch of your dollars in the stock market. I told boomers all the time. I've had boomers ask me like, well, what should I do? And I tell them the truth. They don't like it. They hate it. They're like, no, I don't want to do any of that. Speculative. No. Orange internet money, blah, blah, blah. I don't understand it. Like, why don't you just take, I don't know, 50, 60 hours and research it a bit? Did you take 50, 60 hours to research a 401k? Probably not. You just listen to some guy in a suit tell you, you listen to, Jordan Belfort in a suit tell you to give you your money, or give him your money. I'm not picking on Jordan Belfort. I'm not. I'm saying Jordan Belfort would agree with me. He would agree with me on that statement. Wolf of Wall Street, he would agree with me on that statement, 100%. The fact that you would sit there and just believe him blindly and just say, yeah, man, well, I'll just give you the money. Here you go. Here's $2,000 a month of my money for savings going into a gambling account. As opposed to doing maybe a little bit of research and like understanding a bit of money, because as soon as you start understanding how money works itself, you start to change the way that you look at money. It's important. So yeah, no, well, 401ks would vanish, and it would be unfortunate, but such is the case. It's why I would tell people, like, dude, if all of your money is in a 401k and it's in the stock market, I would at least, I'm not telling you what to do, but I would research other options. There you go. I would research other options, and I would avoid real estate like the plague right now. Oh, dude. Oh boy. People in real estate, man, they're about to. It's not gonna be pretty. I'm not much a fan of the road pirates. Oh no, I'm not. I can't even say what my opinion is on this app. It's not. You go see me over on like former Bird site, you'll see my opinion, a lot more clearly there. I get away with a lot more over there. The country's infrastructure has never helped on. Let's see here. That's my life. I'm on the burnout side, just work. Yeah, no kidding, it happens. American says, sorry, hold on here. TikTok did it to me again. It skips down here really, really fast. American citizens have to learn to stick together. They do. It's really unfortunate. The court systems are outdated too. I don't know if it's outdated. They're very corrupt. I don't think there's anything about the court system nowadays that I would trust on almost anything. Very, very, very little, because so much of it is subjective, right? There was a cop, in fact, he was a former cop. I don't know if you saw the video. It was on TikTok, and he was a former cop, and he's like, hey man, I used to be a cop. Let me just say how it is. He says the problem is that law is so subjective. It's the officer's opinion, then it becomes the prosecutor's opinion, then it becomes the judge's opinion. It's like there's so much. It's because there's too many laws. Ultimately, remember we talked about just briefly about whatever half hour ago I mentioned this, that like laws come from somebody trying to get rich, or they got rich and now they're trying to stay rich, so we need to create a bunch of laws and force everybody to like behave a certain way. That's not a constitutional republic. That's just a bunch of people trying to rip each other apart and steal. It's just using the law to loot from everybody. That's all it is, and trying to do legal looting so that you can have this sort of pompous feeling of superiority that you're a law-abiding citizen. Again, I have to be careful how I say this kind of stuff, because like I said, remember, 60%, I'm editing 60% of my opinion out from this talk. You'd have to actually meet me in person to get the real opinion. But yeah, you're right. It's outdated in such a way that it's basically just legalized looting. And and of course, you also have lots of people that have decided to vote for a bunch of politicians. This is particularly true for boomers. Sorry, boomers, but this is the truth. That have voted for all kinds of laws that benefit them. They don't benefit anybody else. Everybody else is screwed by all these laws, but they benefit you. And so you just keep voting for this kind of crap. And so the people that are trying to survive in the real world, they have the laws constantly working against them. And yeah, I mean, eventually, and the check and balance, you're like, well, how do we have a check and balance? That used to be the Second Amendment. That's what the check and balance used to be. Like, well, but yeah, I know, but Axel, I see you on Former Bird Sighting. You talk about like cruise missiles, like people should own private cruise missiles. Yes, they should. People should indeed own private cruise missiles. That is a check and balance. That's how you make sure that you're not given, a ticket that you didn't really deserve. Because if you're given a ticket, remember, there's two laws on the planet: physics and conscience, right? There's two laws on the planet: physics and conscience. And whatever you can live with, you can live with. And I'm sorry, but you run up against someone like me. I've got a very clean conscience nowadays in my lifetime. Okay? I didn't always, but I do now. And I can very cleanly say that, like, listen, if you're going to give me a ticket or something, or do something to me that I think that I don't actually genuinely deserve, because I think that, that you're being wrong about this, and you're doing something with malice, I have no problem entering in launch codes and turning the key and taking out half a county of people like you. I got no problem with that. None. And I would go wrap it, turn the fan on, and get a good night's sleep, have breakfast in the morning and not think twice about it. Just like that. And don't think that I wouldn't have a problem with it. Let's see here. You shouldn't have millions of dollars to run for. Yeah, and you're right about that. And that is a problem. Is that the funding? Where's the money coming from all over the world, from countries that hate us? And it's funding American politicians. So countries that hate us are funding American politicians, and we're supposed to vote for those American politicians who are supposed to have our best interests in mind, but they've been funded by a country or countries that do not like the American people. None of that makes any sense. And so, yeah, that should be a hard no as well. Again, like I said, so there's just a few rules, right? If a politician or somebody running for office can't do something like this and engage with the population and talk to them, and they can't, and they have a bunch of handlers telling them what they can and can't say, and they can't, like, no, the answer should be 100% no. And if their funding comes from a bunch of countries that don't like us, nope, no way. Should be a hard no. We're not voting for you under any circumstances at all. And that's a good way of filtering out all of these crazy people. The internet is a powerful enough tool nowadays. It's a powerful enough tool to actually filter out all of these people very quickly. You shouldn't have any of this stuff anymore. Not anymore. Not anymore. You shouldn't have, there's no excuse for any of this anymore going forward, because there's just too much communication now. And it's so fast. It's blindingly fast. They can't keep up with all their lies anymore. So you're putting a name in the hat? No. Any skeletons? Oh, I got tons of them, dude. I have like cemeteries behind me. So not just skeleton in the closet, man. I have like whole cemeteries. So you think other countries dumping U.S. bonds could accelerate? I don't know that they're going to dump as fast as possible, because remember, they're just as attached to the U.S. dollar as well. Other countries, there's something like, 68 countries that are basically dollarized. So that means if the US dollar were to go away tomorrow morning, 68 countries would get dragged down as well. They would be just as screwed. So, and of course, then there would be the ripple effect of something like that. So I think most countries are terrified, especially we're talking at the political, economic level. Okay, again, remember, the average person isn't really affected by this kind of stuff, other than the next morning they wake up, the currencies all collapse, and they're like, it isn't like we all of a sudden we decide, okay, now the dollar's collapsed, so now we all have to grow mohawks and ride motorcycles really fast and do the whole road warrior thing. That's not reality. The reality is that the first thing that happens is that you look outside and nothing has changed. Everything looks the same, and you're like, okay, how do I pay my electric bill? Okay, the electric company has to first decide what kind of payment do we want. And then we just go infrastructure up. That's exactly how it works. And so from from the day-to-day, work-a-day, like normal people on the ground type, like for us, it's just a matter of like, okay, well, what kind of currency are we using? And is it going to be just conjure of nothing? Are you going to try and do this CBDC, thing where it's just basically more fake money? Or are we going to, actually say, hey, listen, we don't want you people conjuring money out of nothing? So that's the question. But do I think I think they'd have to find a buyer. Who are they going to find a buyer, for the bonds besides the Fed? And it's just more and more money printing. There is really no way out of this. There was an old video I did about a little over a year ago where I tried explaining this, and I actually got. I mean, people actually did see it. This is back when people used to see my content. I pointed out that when you have a situation like that we're in, we have a birth rate decline, and that's why everything is fading. That's why you're not seeing, like, all these companies are panicking and freaking out because they're like, well, where are all the customers? You lost your customers 20 years ago, right? You're just seeing the effect now, but it takes 20 to 25 years for birth rate to show up. It's a lagging indicator. You understand, business-wise. It's the leading indicator when you're looking at like what's going to happen in the future, but it's a lagging indicator when you look at the here and now. At the here and now, you have a population collapse. You just don't have as many people having kids, and certainly not baby boomer level, right? Remember, baby boomers are so named the baby boom generation because it was abnormal. It was an abnormally large number of births that took place. After World War II, from 1946 to 1964, everybody had like 8 kids. Everybody went and did that. And let's see here. There we go. Yes, thank you, TikTok. So when you have a situation like that happens, and then on the back side of that, you have Gen X and millennials, for example, who we didn't all have 7 or 8 kids each, right? Like, we just didn't. Who could afford that? Right? I mean, imagine, put yourself, I mean, like, whoever you are watching this, let's say that you're in your like mid-20s, let's say you're in your early 30s, put yourself in this position. Imagine having like 6 kids right now that you got to feed. Dude, most people would like, they would go into shock trying to figure out how they would even pay for that. Where would you even find that much food? How could you afford a $600 a week grocery bill or more, depending on where you live in the country? So this older video I did like over a year ago, I pointed this out, and that's all that's happening. That's why corporate America is freaking out, and they're trying to blame everything from AI to, it's not. It's just that, dude, there's not enough people in the back end to support all of this. You built all this infrastructure, and more importantly, you took on an enormous amount of debt with interest, and there isn't enough market share now to support all of that debt with interest. You have done this to yourself. This is why you don't do stuff like this. So, yeah, please post this on YT. I will. These always go up on YT, like usually 2-3 hours later or something. It depends on how long it takes for TikTok to process it, because lives take a little while to process. Without food, to pay mine off, I really struggled for many years. That's what I mean. Some people did that, and that's what I'm saying. That's very admirable, and that's why I would never presume to try and do so-called forgiveness of student loans. I would never do something like that. I think that's a terrible idea, because it's insulting to people who did just that. The people who did go without food, and who did go without maybe having a nice car with air conditioning in it that worked, so that they could pay their student loans off. It's an insult to those people. And again, it's an insult to people who didn't take out a bunch of student loans. No, what you would do is usually do it the proper way. You just send everybody money, everybody money, and everybody gets $500,000. The people who have student loans, they pay them off. The people who already paid their student loans off, they get reimbursed. Simple. Then you just take your $500,000 and you're like, hey, I already paid my student loans off. I'm going to go buy a new car that has air conditioning, and it runs really well. Makes sense. And yet people keep worshiping these billionaires. It is absolutely mind-blowing to me, the billionaire worship. I don't understand it. I have never understood it. Most of these people are broke. Most of these so-called fake billionaires, dude, these people are broke. They've got money on, it's all on paper. Everything is always on paper. It's never, I don't know how else to explain it. A lot of it's self-valued stuff. I just talked about it. I just did a video on this like 3 days ago or something like that, where I thought like, okay, so you buy a piece of property in Florida and you call it, oh, now I'm going to make it a private, super exclusive hotel only for the super mega rich or something like that. Okay, well, how much is it worth? Well, I'm going to self-value it at like $7 billion. Come on, any idiot can do that, man. Come on, no. I agree with you in meaning your diagnosis, but fully disagree with prescriptions. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, if you got a better idea, dude, I'm open to it. I mean, I'm not like, I'm only telling you guys, you understand what my thought is of how to solve something. Like, dude, if you have a better idea, I'm all ears. I would love to hear it. But like most people I've run into, it's usually what they come up with. I'm not picking on anybody who said this. I'm just pointing this out. This is what I usually run into in my lifetime with a lot of people. The solutions that most people come up with are just no different than Thulsa Boomer, the orange man. It's no different than him. It's always some kind of top-down kind of thing, like let's make a law, let's do this, let's spend a bunch of money, let's create 10 cities to nowhere, freedom cities instead of 10-minute cities, and like it's always this top-down type of thing. It's never a bottom-up solution. It's never something like, hey, this is unworkable. This is unworkable. This can't work any longer. And it usually turns into something like, and again, especially with a lot of my leftist followers, because I do have a lot of commie followers, it's always, we need more communism. And it's like, in other words, another central bank. So in other words, the same problem we have currently right now. That's what it usually turns into. It eventually devolves into some kind of an argument about how, well, no, we can have better people. No, you clearly cannot, because if you could have better people, you would be voting for better people right now. So no, that's not how, and that's not how human beings work. It just isn't. Human beings do not operate like that fundamentally. They don't operate like that. People are greedy. People lose sight. People do all kinds of stupid stuff. People are just flat stupid. They do things like this. And especially when they tend to get a taste of power that they haven't had before. And they don't treat it like the dangerous, the dangerous servant and fearful master that it actually is. They don't treat it like that. They treat it with disrespect. They start thinking, they think that they're somehow not susceptible to mass psychosis. That is not true. 100%. No one out there is exempt from that. Those rules are pretty solid. Once people start getting a little too full of themselves, they tend to stop, being cautious, and they start thinking they have all the answers to everything. And it becomes a huge problem very quickly for people downstream of that. It's just how it is. And so, again, the solutions I point to, which are just simply saying, hey, how about we just get rid of all this madness and go to a hard currency that nobody controls? That means that there's no need to have anybody police it. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to hire a bunch of people. You don't need to create more laws, because every time you create a law, you create a business. Every time you create a law, you have to hire somebody. You obligate somebody to go out and enforce said law, right? Well, when you do something like that, that's a cost. And you got to pay somebody to enforce the law. Okay, well, how do you pay them? You got to tax people. And it's like, this is just, it's a vicious cycle. And it's in fact, there's a name for it, in fact, called anacyclosis. There's an actual name for that problem called anacyclosis, invented by Polybius, a Greek philosopher, who came up with the term anacyclosis, which just simply means another vicious cycle. That's all it means. It just means that people go into power, they become corrupt, they eventually fall. And there's like 7 different phases to it, and you're right back in the exact same spot you are right now. So this isn't, I'm not trying to criticize, I'm not trying to overtalk it, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm really not. I'm just saying that, like, a lot of times I see this stuff. It's usually something like, we just need to stop right there. Who is we? And stop with just. No. There is no just. It's, I don't know how else to explain that. Like, that's kind of how it works. You have to really think this stuff through. And usually, if you think it through long enough, you're eventually going to reach a lot of the same conclusions that a lot of other people. Statism is not going to solve it. Culture solves it very quickly. What is a culture? All a culture is just people who actually agree on a certain set of rules themselves as a culture. And that culture generally creates a border. And there it is. the word border, which is that right there is the word that all the libertarians, losertardians, and the globalists hate. That's as soon as you put the word border out there, the globalists hate you, along with the losertardians, and because all a losertardian is just a poor globalist who doesn't own a yacht yet. And if they owned a yacht, they would do the exact same kinds of things that all the globalists and island people, the list people, do on those yachts out in international waters. Same people, right? So that's exactly what would happen. So I'm not trying to like browbeat that topic, but I just understand that if you've got a really good idea, then I'm all over it. But every idea I've ever heard so far has been usually some kind of top-down, let's vote for better people, let's have some kind of socialism, free healthcare, free. It's like there's no such thing as free. There are two laws on this planet, physics and conscience. There is nothing about physics that is free. Nothing. Nothing. Look at the law of gravity, right? Newtonian physics, dude. There is nothing free about that. You want to escape gravity, you have to leave something behind. I mean, it's just how it is. So, I mean, and these things don't really change. And so there's always going to be a cost. In other words, that makes sense. So again, I'm not trying to browbeat that, but it's been kind of something I've been getting a lot of DMs on, and I'm kind of getting a little annoyed by it, because usually the solutions I end up saying it's something like, we just, and then it's like, who's we, and what do you mean just? And then it turns into something like, create more money, do this, free that, and it's like none of that's going to happen, dude. None of it's going to happen. There are too many people out there are not going to just go do a bunch of work for free, because they can't. They got to be able to survive themselves. 401k is liquidity grab. Yeah, it's going to be one hell of a liquidity grab, I'll tell you that. We said gambling at the same time. Yeah, no kidding. I know many people lost everything to your 401k. It can happen. Like I said, past performance is not indicative of future results. People can and do, in fact, lose money. And the 401k doesn't exempt you from this. It did in 2008. 2008, there was a huge bailout. It was a so-called, oh my God, there's an economic crisis. No, there was no crisis. There was no crisis. I wish people would stop calling it the so-called banking crisis. There was no crisis. It was a handful of people who made some really bad business decisions that should have gone bankrupt and should have lost everything. And what should have happened is that the average American shouldn't have even been bothered with it. All that would have happened is the average American would have seen prices on housing get cut in half, like 50%, and watch everything just, like their lives just get better. That's what should have happened. Everything would have just got cheaper, and a handful of billionaires would have gone broke. That's what should have happened. Instead, a bunch of billionaires got bailed out, and they kept their yacht orders, and they blew up an even bigger asset bubble and turned it into this. This is what happened. This is why we have the disaster we have today, is because they didn't let all these people go broke back in 2008 when they should have. 401k is a giant Ponzi. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Can you give tips on what we should do with our money instead? I'm a hard money kind of guy. I'm a hard asset kind of guy. In fact, the video that I just uploaded prior to this live stream, I just answered that question for somebody. And I be careful with that, because I don't like to tell people what to do with their money, because you know your money better than I know your money. I would never presume to tell you how to live your life. That's weird. I've always found that to be like strange to me. There's like control freak people out there that love this idea of telling people what they should do. Like I've always thought that is weird, because like, dude, you don't know that person's personality. You don't know what their tolerance is, and you also don't know that person on an individual level. I mean, you could be telling them to do something that's like horribly dangerous for them. That maybe they shouldn't be doing that. By contrast, you could be telling them to do something that is actually not going to work for them, and they don't know how to do it. So I would never presume to tell you what you should do with your money. I can say that I would definitely start researching the idea of money itself, start possibly in the gold arena, research why gold was chosen as money and everything, even though I think there's better options out there. But it's a good start, because it's been around for so long and it's so well established that it's easy to understand it. Okay, because there's so many people out there that talk about it. There are better options, in my opinion, mathematically speaking, but it's a good place to get probably the most knowledge first. Remember, knowledge is more important first than what necessarily to do. And especially if you're asking somebody what they should do, you want to educate yourself as much as possible. Like just no different than, let's say that you are going to go see a doctor or a specialist or something like that. You want to maybe bone up a little bit on what you're going there for, so that you know what questions to ask. No different than going to look at a used car. You're like, oh, hey, I like that used car. Let me go on the internet and look up a bunch of stats about that used car before I go look at it, so that way I know what questions to ask. It's the same kind of idea. Make sense? So I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying, maybe really take the time and be willing to commit, I would say, a good couple, 300-400 hours, which is nothing. That's, in a human lifespan, that's nothing. Be willing to commit that and just learn about money and assets and how money operates. I've got like 800 videos you can go back and rewatch. I mean, I cover a lot of it. A lot of it's review too. I cover a lot of new stuff, but I mean, like, some of it's review. And if you look at the early stuff, the super early stuff that like isn't even on. It's not even on TikTok. It's over on YT. Where I talk about this kind of stuff. It's the importance of understanding where money came from in the first place and how not to get taken advantage of. That's the big part, because it's all about spending power, and that's what you want to keep. It isn't about how much money you make; it's how much money you keep. It's always how much money you keep, not what you make. Always. What would you opt for? I'm guessing you're talking about like, sorry, hold on, let me go back. You did it to me again. TikTok did it to me again. I wish they'd fix that. Let's see here. What would you opt for? I can only give you my personal opinion. It does not have to be yours, and you can think I'm crazy all you want, and that's fine. I personally like orange internet money. I like it. That's as far as I'm going to go with it, and I'm not going to go any further than that, because there's no point in me doing that. I'm not a cheerleader. I'm not promoting anything. Nothing. I make no money off of it. I'm just saying, hey, I mean, I happen to like it because mathematically and intrinsically, in other words, the amount of energy it takes to create that, and there's no way to counterfeit it. I like stuff that can't be counterfeited. Period. That's where I'm at on that. Let's see here. Probably living in the U.S. is risk. Well, just life itself is risk. I mean, every day that you wake up, Disney bucks for U.S. Yeah, no kidding. I used that analogy one time in an old video I did, where I used the Disney buck analogy. That's actually, it's company store bucks, basically. That's the U.S. dollar. It's just, you can use it in their, it all goes to their hedge funds. It all goes to the same people. Imagine if every single store out there had to put, and I said this a long time ago, but a couple times actually recently, but just imagine for a second if every single store that you drive by in every strip mall had the sign of whoever their top shareholders are on it, right? It wouldn't say, it wouldn't say whatever the number of the thing is. It would say their shareholders, which means that everything would say BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. That's what it would be. So it's like just company store bucks. It's not. There's no way to escape it. So what happened? It's sort of like, my wife brought this out. Remember, it's like 55 million degrees in the garage today. It's not that bad. It's hot. Anyway, but in the Soviet Union, their opt-out of the ruble was the US dollar. They were able to use USD and opt out of the ruble. Well, now there's no way to opt out of that, because everything always has to go back to USD. So every time you have to buy USD in order to transact, you are keeping it alive. You are keeping your slavery alive. Hope that makes sense. And the more you study money, the more that'll make sense to you. You make too much sense, brother. I try. Got a vasectomy at 27. That's pretty early to get a vasectomy, it seems to me. Not to mention clothes, extra curricular events, etc. The debt not even recoverable. No, it's not. No, there's no way to do the national debt, for example. This idea, what is it right now? 37 closing in on $38 trillion. Dude, no, there's no mathematical way to pay that back. Period. That isn't including all of the unfunded liabilities on top of that, which is what, north of 100 no, it's more than that now. It's like $230 trillion. There's no way. Come on, these are just stupid numbers. And so no, there's no way to do any of that. No, they'll have to, in order to do that, you just print a bunch of money. And that's all they're going to do, is just keep printing money, but it's always going to stay at the top. It'll never go down, which just creates that pocket inflation problem that we talked about in, like, I don't know, 50 different videos that I've done, where I talk about the idea of pocket inflation, where it's just the money always stays at the top. It never goes to the bottom, because they need to have you in debt to offset their losses. You have to stay in debt to offset all of their losses. That is, by the way, that is both political losses, okay, that means paying for a bunch of wars that we can't afford, and corporate losses. So, and banker losses, because remember, they're all three the same people. They're all the same people. The bankers, the oligarchs, and the politicians, they are all the exact same people. They are all on the same team. It is always the same people, over and over and over, every single time. Paid mine off and struggled a bit, but I still want others to get relief somehow. Yeah, and that's how I would look at that. And the thing is that, like, the people out there, when I say the $500,000 example for the the student loan thing, there's nothing stopping you from giving that away. Like, if you don't need the 500 grand, there's probably other people out there that could probably use the charity. They could probably, you could go build something with it and do something like that. Be very charitable with it. There's no reason you can't do something. Have you ever done a video before on velocity of money? I have, a couple of times, actually. For those of you who don't know what velocity money, that just means that how fast it's out in the economy and if it's turning to burning. And right now there's almost no velocity. There's velocity, again, there's a little bit of velocity at the top. There's almost none on the bottom, because again, what that would do is that would get people paying off debt, and they cannot have that. Let's see here. Bro, we talked on a live yesterday. We concluded we are given the illusion of choice. Yeah, it's what it is. I mean, as across everything, again, not even just the political side, but just almost everything is kind of an illusion of choice, and it's because of the currency. Once you have an actual free market currency, whether it's orange internet money or gold bullion and other little yellow metal discs that people are exchanging for goods and services, once you break away from anybody controlling where the money is going, they very rapidly lose control. They lose political control very quickly and everything. And again, especially on top of that, imagine doing something like that and then also having an actual Second Amendment. Well, then, my God, you'd actually have real true freedom then, because that's the only way that you get actually freedom. I don't know if you guys know that or not. For those of you out there that are like, we want to have equality, man. If you want equality, then you want equality of armaments. That's the only way you get equality, by the way. That's the only way that you achieve it, is if everybody mutually assured destruction. Okay, that's your launch codes, cruise missiles, the whole bit. Like, private cruise missiles in your garage. I could fit probably 10 of them in here easily. So, and let's see here. Your memory is insane. I love the way you speak. Well, thank you. Let's see here. We can also conclude that we're living in a democratic-built socialist economy. It's, again, remember, anytime you have a central bank, you're going to have the same outcome. Even if you wanted to have the idea of, let's have like a conservative Republican type economy, and let's have a central bank, you are going to end up with this every time. It's the natural default setting of central banks that people get in, because remember, you're involving people. People are imperfect. People are terrible. People are horrible. Right? We have but to look around us. People are horrible. They're horrible to each other. They're horrible to themselves. And so you have to factor that in, that no matter how awesome you think somebody is, they are still human beings, and they are still susceptible to all of the same temptations that are out there at all times. You have to keep that in mind. When you're dealing with a human, think about this. When you're dealing with a human being, you are dealing with the top of the food chain, literally. Like, let that sink in for a second here. Every time you do business, anytime you talk to a human being, engage with them, you are dealing, in fact, with the top of the food chain. Thank you so much. And that means that they are actually the true apex predator. That is who you're dealing with as a human being every single time. That includes you. So factor that stuff into your equation. Every time somebody starts off with the idea of so-called best of intentions, remember, they are just as susceptible to every temptation that an apex predator would be susceptible to. You could raise a tiger cub from a little kitten all the way up. And there's all the stories about it, right? You already know where I'm going with this. The guy who raises the little tiger, and then one day the tiger gets a level of temptation as an apex predator. That is exactly what a cat is. Your house cat, the house cat that lives in your house, if they thought they could take you down and make a meal out of you, they probably would. I mean, just keep that in mind. That is how apex predators work. So human beings are no different. And so that's how that, so you could always have the best of intentions, but the reality is that you are still dealing with deeply flawed people that are always, the temptation is ever present, no matter who you're dealing with. You, me, anybody, right? You're all part of the same compost heap and decomposing matter that makes up this world. Yes, you're all individual snowflakes and beautiful and blah, 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 but it's both are true simultaneously. Both can be true at the exact same time. 30 trillion plus isn't recoverable debt unless you completely shut everything. Oh, yeah, and again, that's just, none of that's going to happen. It's just, and the thing is, it's theoretical. Remember, most of the, it's like, I did this video recently where I explain this once again to a lot of my leftist followers, my commie followers, where they're like, well, let's just take all the money from the billionaires, man. You realize most of that's fake. Most of the money these billionaires claim they have, they don't even have it. It's fake. It's nothing. You wouldn't really get anything. Even if you were to seize everything that they have, the valuations are arbitrary in many cases. They just created the values out of nothing. So you would be getting really nothing for it. Does that make sense? That's why it's a fugazi. It's fake. This is all a fantasy that everybody's just kind of living. And that's why I talk about hard currency. Hard currency ends the fantasy. That's how it works. Bitcoin XRP, maybe. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Again, I'm more of an orange internet money fan myself, so I don't really own with any of the other currencies. Sorry. One of my biggest concerns about Trump was how much the American real estate he sold to foreigners. Yeah, it's a big problem that I have too. I don't know why it is that any country owns any part of the U.S. I still don't. I've never gotten a good answer out of anybody on that. For real. I've never heard a good answer from anyone, anywhere, about why it is that the U.S. needed to sell, any farmland to other countries. That's, that's like other countries don't do that. Other countries wouldn't do that. Like, so I don't know why it is the U.S. has this idea that we can sell farmland to any other country. I wouldn't care who it is. Any other country shouldn't be owning that. It should be owned by Americans. Americans owned by America owned by Americans. Imagine that. What a novel idea. It's mind blowing, right? Percentage that we become an authoritarian nation. We are already there. No such thing as a free lunch. First thing was taught in economics. Yeah, that's how it works. Free is not a thing. It has never been a thing. Never been a thing. It's just like the free healthcare thing. There is no such thing. Someone somewhere is going to pay for that, even if you just decide to finally just shackle and chain the doctors and force them to be doctors. Good luck with that. But yeah, nothing is going to be free. There has to be equivalent exchange. It has to exist. That's why you want to have some kind of a market. Otherwise, you basically just end up with nothing but slavery, and it falls apart, and you get erased to the bottom, and it happens every single time. Our greatest ally gets free healthcare. Yeah, I know they do. It's not free. It's free to them. It's not free to us, the people who pay for it. Let's see here. They're really hiding foreclosures. Oh, I guarantee they are. I would almost guarantee that. There was a house that was across the street from my old house before it got crushed by a tree. There was a house that was across the street that was, I want to say that thing was empty for like a year and a half. Like more than that. I mean, it was empty forever. And yeah, because they didn't want to lose money on the house, so they just basically buried the foreclosures and eventually did some kind of like a tricky short sale kind of thing. Yeah, they absolutely do stuff like that because they can't have if you were to actually start having all these foreclosures and all these properties were to start hitting the streets at the cash settlement price, what's called the discovery price, which means there's no financing, right? For those of you who don't know this, if you don't know how foreclosures work, they're sold sort of so-called courthouse steps. It's usually at an auction. And you go to the auction, and when you bid on it, right, you are expected to pay that day for that house in cash, which is usually a whole bunch of money orders that you show up with in a little envelope, and you get from the bank, and then you end up paying. So if you let's say you bought that house, for $100,000 for just whatever, then you need to get into your little thing, and you have to pay for that house that day for that house in cash, and it's expected that's how it works. That's how foreclosures work. Most people don't have that. They have to finance this kind of stuff, which means that that's what happens. So imagine all those houses hitting the foreclosure market all at one time, and the highest bid is like $8,000. Well, a lot of people have $8,000. A lot of people have access. You have easier access as a millennial, let's say, to $8,000 than you do $200,000, right? So what if all those foreclosures hit the street, and the highest bids are $8,000 or $9,000? And so you decide to show up at a courthouse, and you're like, oh wow, I can get that for 12 grand. Done. Here you go. Done and done. Sign me up. And then now you own a house outright for $12,000. Cash, no payments. You're done. All you have to do is go to the county and fight them on the property taxes now. So yeah, I mean, I really think they are hiding a lot of that stuff personally. Let's see here. Mike Hunt, what's up? What's up? To you too. The orange coin, I agree. Let's see here. Book recommendations. Let me go. Hold on. Stop. TikTok did it to me again. Book recommendations. I don't have a ton of them. I recommend The Creature from Jekyll Island. I always recommend that. That's pretty much a staple. So if you've already read it, then that's kind of it. There's so many books that I've read that I don't even know where I would send somebody anymore to look all this stuff up. So much of it now is available very condensed online. I would recommend this. There's like really two good channels that are both on YT. One is called After School, AFTERSKOOL. That is a really cool channel. They may or may not talk about all kinds of stuff that you may want to talk about, but they do hit on some of this stuff quite a bit. And it is worth definitely watching. And most of it's very short, and they condense a lot of very complex ideas, which is really kind of nice. The other one is called Academy of Ideas. And Academy of Ideas is another one of these ones that they take these very complex topics that are usually from books that are like that thick, and they condense them into like 20 minutes to where you really get the meat out of it. Now, does that mean that the rest of the books aren't worth reading? No, of course they are. But at the same time, if you're trying to get just like the gist of it, get the really good meat out of it, that'll do it. But in the meantime, but you can go back and do that, right? I mean, but you can get, in other words, you can get sort of a good solid preview and then go back. So, and those two channels take apart a lot of books. So I recommend them. Orange money, ? That would be the B word. Let's see here. $317 trillion in debt global. Yeah, dude, come on. That's ridiculous. That's an absurd number. That's more than the planet's even worth. Come on. No, none of that's going to be paid back. And again, it's most of that is all arbitrary, fake valued nonsense that has been hypothecated out of nothing. There's nothing to back any of that up. It's just seriously, it's hopes and dreams. It's nonsense, and it's conjured from nothing. It is a terrible idea, and it has done an enormous amount of damage to people. And it's done an enormous amount of damage to people psychologically, because that's where you get this weird billionaire worship thing, which people really need to stop. Like, you need to stop doing that. I'm telling you, seriously, this is a very big thing. You do not want to start worshiping billionaires. Talk about a false idol. Wow. No. Wow. You may have already talked about this. Have you heard about possible repricing of gold? It's possible. They can maybe really, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to revalue. Maybe if you were to do it in US dollars and you wanted to try and go back to like a gold standard, you'd have to reset the price of gold at like $2 million an ounce or something like that. I mean, like it's just nuts right now. I mean, I get a lot of grief from this when I point this out. The minimum wage in 1971, prior to August 15th of 1971, was $1.60 an hour. If you were to convert that to gold, even then, it was 1.83 ounces of gold. That for your work week, right, which is $64. So that would be 1.83 ounces of gold. 1.83 ounces of gold today is over $6,000 per week in today's in spending power. That's how bad the spending power has been destroyed, and that's using the current numbers without auditing Fort Knox to find out if there isn't even any gold to actually settle this, because nobody knows how much gold there is. Gold has been like thank you so much. Gold has been manipulated so many times, and nobody knows really who owns all of these pallets of gold, like who the real owner is on them, because so many of them have been leased out and then released and leased back and so forth. Like they've been sold and leased back, like on and on, right? There's all these crazy gimmicks that happen in the gold market, and there would have to be a settlement that took place. So I don't want to get hyper technical on this, but that's what it would require. It would require what's called an actual hard settlement in physical on gold in order to achieve that. And if you were to do a global hard settlement on physical gold, dude, I don't think you probably couldn't give enough dollars to people to get 1 ounce of gold out of them. It would probably go to infinity, infinity and beyond. Because yeah, that's how bad I think it actually is. I don't think there's any gold in Fort Knox, and I think that's the reason why that the Orange administration dropped that line of inquiry like instantly. Like we're gonna go to Fort Knox and we're gonna audit it, and then they hauled off and did nothing, and they dropped it completely. Like just never brought it up again ever. Period. And I think it's because if you walk in there, you're going to find there's nothing in there but tungsten bars that have a light veneer of gold on them, and that's it. It's just there for show for tourists, and that's it. That's what I think that you'd see. I don't think you're going to see anything. I think they spent that probably somewhere between 1865 and about 1913. All that gold is gone. Remember, Henry Ford. Remember, you've all heard me tell the story. Henry Ford agreed to sell Ford Motor Company to Durant. Right? He owned General Motors, or was the CEO of General Motors. He agreed to sell Ford Motor Company, lock, stock, and barrel to them right now in a deal for, I think it was $10 million. $2 million of stock, $8 million cash. But the deal was the cash had to be paid in physical gold. Remember, gold was 20 bucks an ounce. So that means, I don't remember, I did the math on it one time, but that was X amount of ounces of gold. They would have to show up with a dump truck. Actually, it would have fit in a pickup truck, at his house and unload all these gold bars. And there wasn't a bank out there that would give Durant that much gold. Not one. Not even multiple banks. He went to multiple banks begging for them to do this deal because this was going to be a big, because imagine what would have happened if GM had actually absorbed Ford as a company back then. That would be like a goldfish swallowing a whale. And yeah, that would have been a big deal. And yeah, they didn't allow it. None of the banks, every bank turned him down cold and said, no way. There is absolutely no way that we're giving you that kind of money. So in physical gold, because they didn't have it. That's the reality. They didn't have it. They'd already hypothecated that to worthlessness long before then. They didn't have that. Let's see here. Thoughts on what you do if you won the lottery? Well, I mean, assuming I played, and or I found a winning ticket. Let's do it that way. Frankly, it depends on how much it is. I mean, I'm pretty provincial. I mean, I would probably finish building my house and everything. I would put in a very nice pool, and probably not change a whole lot. There's not a whole lot in my life that I would really do a lot of changing. I kind of like playing the game that I'm playing, so I don't know that I would be spending a lot of time doing like jet setting all over the world, and this is not my personality. It just isn't, and it doesn't. And I'm not begrudging or judging anybody who does that. I'm just saying that, like in my case, I mean, it's not. It isn't a big priority to me, and so there might be some. I'd buy maybe some farmland. There's a lot of farmland I probably kind of like, and be able to run my farms and everything. I would buy a P-51 though. I would do that, because as a pilot, I've always wanted one of those, and I would. There's a couple of planes I would buy. But to fly myself, not jets and everything. Planes I would buy, but to fly myself, not jets and everything. Don't get me wrong. I mean, hey, I love the idea of the Gulfstream 650s. Those are beautiful planes, they really are. But you got to have a staff, and the cost to maintain all that is absolutely insane. I don't know if any of you have ever done the math on that kind of stuff. Go try and do the math on what it costs to maintain the life of a so-called billionaire. There's a reason why these guys have to be constantly hawking products everywhere and photobombing. It's because, dude, the amount of money it costs to maintain one aircraft, is insane. It's nuts what it costs just to maintain that stuff. So just to maintain a Cessna is bad enough. Okay, let alone anything that's like super exotic and that has to have a staff to maintain it and a ground crew. So. You can hear my cicadas in the background having all kinds of great night. 1789. How did the French kill off the aristocracy and the economy after that? I believe it was with the guillotine, if memory serves. Let's see here. Hang tight here. The thing lost me on this. Take a drink when you squint. Yeah, don't do that. Do not take a drink when I squint. You will end up probably hospitalized, especially if you're doing like shots or something like that. You will probably end up in the hospital. I would recommend against that. If aliens wanted to buy the planet, they'd have to offer probably offer 21 million. Yeah, no kidding. Let's see here. Just tuned in. Do you crypto? Again, I like orange internet money. That's the extent of it. That's the extent of my crypto stuff. I mean, I don't know how else to be more clear about that. Just join the jet share. Yeah, no jet share. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could do it. There's ways to go about that kind of stuff. It is less money, I suppose, but there you have it. So, but anyway, those were just sort of my thoughts on some of this weekend here. I didn't really expect to see many people show up, but there was like between 50 and 80 people here, I guess, for the most part, at least. As we've gone along here. Thoughts on silver being undervalued? I'm not an expert on silver. David Morgan is. I would look up silverguru.com. He actually is an expert on silver and silver mining and everything related to silver. But I can tell you that silver, yeah, is undervalued, at least in my opinion. I think it has been for a long time. And I think that it's one of those things that like they kind of have to, because silver is a commercial metal and it's used in basically everything. So you try to keep it as artificially low so that you can kind of keep your costs and your products down. Because if you actually had to pay, an actual market price on silver, especially if somebody like really did corner the market and actually physical and demanded to be settled in physical, and that's assuming that they would even honor that, because in a lot of cases the exchanges, they're not even required to honor physical settlement. They can just send you a check and cash and say, whatever, we decided to settle in physical. So assuming you could press the matter, assuming you could do it, then maybe it would work out. But then again, I mean, all they would do is just start mining even more as fast as they could to try and keep the prices on everything down. Because remember, when you're printing dollars, you can pay for labor out of printed dollars all day long and give this illusion that prices aren't going up. It's really really hard to get your mind around until you really spend a little time studying this kind of stuff. And then you see the way that the mechanism works, that they can pull this kind of stuff off. Does that make any sense? But yeah, overall, I think silver is undervalued. The question is that what is the actual value? We don't know. We wouldn't know unless there was an actual, again, a settlement, and I don't see it happening anytime soon. Hi, Driveway Kitty, welcome back. You want to have a Jet 2 holiday? I don't even know what that means. Sorry. How do I learn about this mechanism? Which mechanism? Just to be clear, which mechanism? Let's see here. I'm going to copy and paste your robbery policy into my employee handbook. No kidding. Gold to silver ratio. Yeah, that's one way to look at it. That is one way to look at it, and that is out of whack now. Would you fly a commercial right now? I try to avoid commercial flight to the extent I can. Yeah. Largely because commercial flying now is really no fun. It's like it's not only like a work, it's like work it's like drudgery to go fly commercial. And I hate to say that because it really sucks. I used to be really excited to go fly commercial when I was younger, and now it's like I'm horrified by commercial air travel anymore. Just like the whole industry, as with everything, it's deteriorating. I mean, remember what the stat? There was a stat that just was released recently, like something like 43% of people, of Americans doing their job, whatever it is, have checked out mentally. 43%. That includes pilots are in on that as well. I'm not picking on pilots, not at all. I'm saying, dude, they're human like anybody else. And if you've got 43% of people that are kind of checking out mentally because they're just looking at life and going, dude, this sucks. All I'm doing is just doing a job to pay bills. I'm not getting any further ahead. Yeah, you see what I'm saying? So value of gold, etc. Let's see here. I like Amtrak, but it's overpriced. Yeah. Who knows why it's overpriced? I mean, it's actually probably underpriced for what it is, given it's heavily government subsidized, because it's a government operation now. It's not even really a private organization anymore, as I understand it. Amtrak actually was basically taken over by the U.S. government, if I remember right. So, if there's no other questions, then how long has it been here? Where am I at? Has it been like an hour and a half? Yeah, it's been like, it's actually, I usually do about 90 minutes. The $1 billion lottery winning, after taxes, you end up with 200. Is it really that bad now? Yeah, I suppose if you take out the cash out option and then they tax everything, 270 million. That is pretty nuts, isn't it? That's it's still more than I would ever probably use. Frankly, I mean, if I were being just completely just me like thinking out loud, it's probably more than I would use by at least a good 90%. I don't know that I would ever really use that much money. Seriously, there's just, especially the older you get, you get a little older, and you start to see how much it costs to maintain a lot of this stuff, and the things you end up end up owning you, right? Not to get all Fight Club about it, but it's the truth. The more of this crap that you end up buying, it ends up taking it more of your time to try and maintain it than it is for you to actually like just live and enjoy your life. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So it's still like way more than I would probably ever use. I'd end up probably, frankly, giving it a lot of it away, more than likely. That's really the truth. But it wouldn't be in dollars. It would be in another currency. I actually have a different plan for something like that. Actually, I'll share it with you if you want. I'll share it with you briefly. I'm not going to spend much time on this. But if it were me, I would probably buy a whole bunch of orange internet money and then develop a game, like an actual game that you would play like in the real world. And you deposit your own little money in it to play it for real. And then you just create your avatar. You go into it, Ready Player One style. And the actual coin that you would be, earning is actual orange coin, like for real. And it just goes like that. And it would just be sort of a self-perpetuating game wherein, it's open world. You can do whatever you want. You can go nuts all you want, almost GTA style. But at the same time, you also start to understand that like that money is supposed to be finite. It is not supposed to be infinite. It's supposed to be finite. It's supposed to match the way that the human lifespan operates. And so that way it gives it some kind of actual value, because remember, there's a threshold value. Not to get all existentialist about this, but this is the reality. And we've talked about this. I haven't talked about this in a long time, but I have talked about this in the past, that your lifespan is finite, which means there's a threshold to how long you can do the whole, delayed gratification thing. Right? Because some of you have got this idea, if you've been listening to too many philosophers out there who talk about, like the delayed gratification, the donut test, or the marshmallow test, and on and on and on. Like there's a threshold to that, because, and the example I use is, well, if I cook my steak 6 minutes on each side, okay, well, why don't I use the delayed gratification theory and I'll just cook it 6 hours on each side? It'll taste better, right? Right? How about I cook this egg for 6.5 hours? It'll taste better because I cooked it for 6.5 hours as opposed to, 4 minutes. Yeah, see, that's the problem. There's a threshold that exists there. And that's the challenge that exists with money. And when you have the idea of infinite money, you distort your thresholds altogether. And so it distorts it distorts their idea of money entirely. And it ends up warping who they are. And it changes their perspective on the time frame that they have in their life with which to deal. Does that make sense? So it's sort of like the idea of like, that's where you have this sort of delusional thing. There are some women out there who believe like, oh yeah, I'll just start having a family when I'm in early 50s. Biology says otherwise, right? I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just saying, dude, biology says otherwise. So it means that you have to actually think of things a little differently. And that's part of that threshold thing that we talked about. Remember, everything has to be within time frames, time constraints, and that's what I would use a game like that to teach. It would be something like that. So it wouldn't be a teaching game. It'd be a fun game. You can do whatever you want, open world, go PvE, PvP, you name it, go completely nuts. But but the money would be real, which means that the consequences are real. That's the important part. So that's why I get frustrated with guys like Michael Saylor And it's like, I'm just going to just unplug it, and my money's going to go into my coin's going to go into oblivion. That's not what you should be doing. That's not what you should be doing with that. That's actually a terrible idea. If you're going to do something like that, then you need to actually consider legacy, not the other side of that, because the other side of that is, as far as I'm concerned, is just pure selfishness. Just my thought on the matter. Let's see here. So is gold still a good investment? I think so. I mean, I don't see any reason why. I mean, I don't consider gold an investment. I consider it a currency, just like I consider orange internet money. I consider it a currency. I don't consider it an investment. Investment, implies the idea of like a risk. When you're buying something that is a hard currency, the idea is that, or not buying, you're exchanging for a hard currency. It's so that you keep the same currency and spending power. That's what you're after. You're not trying to invest in something for a return. It's hard to think like that, because everything has been geared around the idea of people investing and trying to make like 15% annualized returns, or whatever the S&P is doing. That's because of the inflation rate. So let's say the inflation rate is 15%, and you earn 15%, if you want to call it that, on your so-called investments. Well, it's a wash. All you did was keep your spending power, and that's not how it ever works, because inflation that would nullify the point of inflation. Remember, the point of inflation is that you can't keep up with it. That's the whole point of. Otherwise, there would be no point of inflation. That's why the Federal Reserve thing is a lie. It's like, oh well, target inflation is 2% a year. It should be zero. It should be zero, not 2%. Why is it 2%? Well, because 2% at the extreme wholesale level is billions upon billions of dollars. Actually, it's tens of billions of dollars of profit to them, because they're basically inflating the currency to worthlessness at 2% a year. And it's actually worse than that. It's way worse than that, especially when you figure the compounding effect for that hits the retail level. So yeah, it's actually pretty bad. Game theory with PowerPoint. I don't know it. Sorry, it's not something I have an opinion on. Let's see. Careful, short people, tall words. I don't know what that means. Sorry. Totally makes sense. Thank God you're live finally. I'm almost over, actually. I mean, like, I've been going for almost 2 hours. And it's like it's cooled down. It's only like, I think, 1 million degrees in the garage. It's not like, whatever it was, 40 million like it was earlier. We just bought land. Very good. Yeah, build a house on it. Do something with it. That's the best thing I would tell anybody, that they could do something like that. I mean, if you can do something like build your own place. And I would tell any of the younger people this too, especially the younger folks that are like trying to find houses, and you're like, oh my God, why are these houses all $600,000 or some stupid nonsense like that? Try to find a piece of land and maybe actually build something. It'd probably be cheaper, and build it yourself. Don't. I mean, you can get help and everything, but like, I would really try to avoid it as much as possible, having a bunch of builders, because most of the builders are just going to charge 30%. They're going to go into the Home Depot parking lot, throw a bunch of guys in the truck and give them a bunch of nail guns and have them put 600 nails in a bunch of boards. And like, dude, and we've all seen the videos on TikTok. Scroll TikTok long enough and you'll see the guys, the home inspectors, that are like, what the hell, man, this whole thing's going to fall apart. And you end up spending more money on trying to fix a bunch of problems than the house is even worth. And you're better off, you are better off actually educating yourself and then learning to do some of the stuff yourself. And then not only does it create a bit of self-sufficiency, but it also means that you know what you're getting yourself into. And you can also make sure that your infrastructure for your house, and this is something that I focus on a lot, at least with my place, is the infrastructure. You want to design it in such a way that you can access a lot of infrastructure without having to tear apart half the house to do it. That's a big thing, because a lot of these builders, they don't build thinking like that. The meter's on one side, the other meter's on the other side, the plumbing's going all through the house. There's no main wall, no main wet ball. No. You want to try and design stuff in a manner that is actually kind of functional. Don't get me wrong, I love beauty, I love architecture, I love all that stuff. But there's also a practical reality that you kind of have to deal with, in that, like, well, if you're going to maintain it, you want to be able to maintain it as easy as possible. Just my opinion. You do what you want to do. So is gold a good buy? Sorry, Mr. C. I think it's always a good buy if you're just trying to hold it, right? I mean, that's it. If you're buying and holding something, then I can't touch you. It's the same thing I would tell you about art. You would buy art because you want to buy art, not because you're trying to make money off of it, right? But I see gold as a currency, not like an abstract investment. These new builds have tons of problems on you. There's so many. There's so many problems. I see them too, and they're absolutely horrible. I'm in the fuel hauling industry. Do you think it would be worth it or profitable to buy a truck? I suppose it depends on if you already have customers. So if you already have customers lined up that are willing to have you haul fuel for them, then it might be, depending upon how much your costs are. You have to, I mean, you do a cost benefit analysis and look and see if it's worth it. I would recommend, though, I would try to, especially truck financing, be careful in the truck financing, because a lot of times the interest rates are so out of sight. They're like 29% interest. You will end up basically just working to pay the interest on that truck. You'll never actually, you will work very, very hard for very little money. Now, if you're able to like buy the truck outright and buy your fuel trailer outright, and you own your equipment, and you're able to do a lot of your own maintenance, especially, that's also helpful, which means if you're able to buy some of the older equipment, and I say older equipment because, I mean, again, I drive a 2003. And the reason I bought that truck deliberately, I could have bought anything. I bought a 2003 because I can maintain it. Like, I understand my truck, and I understand the engine that's in it, and I understand all of the components that are about it, and it's easy for me to maintain. So you kind of factor that stuff in. Makes sense? So I can't really tell you what to do, but I would say, because I don't have enough information, but I would first do a cost benefit analysis, Chris. Underground house cooled by the earth. I can't do them here. We don't do underground down here in Houston. There is no underground. There's water. You have an underground house is called a swimming pool down here. Thank you. Yes, you're welcome. How do you stay so grounded? What do you mean? I mean, like, I don't know what you mean, so I have to clarify. What do you mean by that? Paul, I guess, is who asked that question. Because I don't have enough. I don't have enough information to answer that question. If you're able to elaborate a tiny bit, maybe I can answer that question in the next like 3 or 4 minutes here. But if so if you want to clarify, level-headed and calm, collected, maybe that's maybe, yeah. Again, it's just experience, lots of experience. And experience just comes from time. If you follow my other video work, you know that I just talked about this like a couple of videos ago, that there's a difference between authority, which is you earn authority, versus credentials. Credentials you purchase, or you rent, or you go and somebody like bestows them upon you, kind of thing. That's the difference. There's a huge difference between the two. And when you earn authority over time and patience and loss, I mean, you think I've lost more money than probably any 10 people I know. When you do that, you end up earning your authority because of the world around you. And when you do that, you hit sort of a Zen moment of realizing that a lot of things that happen to us in our day-to-day life, they mean a lot in the moment, but that changes. That moment will change. And because the door swings both ways, and it may swing the other way for a while, but eventually it swings the other way back. And those little victories are actually what make it worth it, right? So the best example I could use, the literary example I could use that was turned into the fictional story on HBO, which would be the Game of Thrones example, which would be like, if you notice like the first like 4 seasons, it's nothing but losses. like the Stark family, it's just nothing but endless, horrible things that happen to them and loss the entire time. And it's those tiny victories on the way up that actually make it worth playing the game, right? No different than any other game. If you understand the way games play, if you always won the game, it's like playing solitaire. If you always won the game, you'd stop playing. If you always won the game, you would eventually get bored with it and you would stop playing. But because the game changes, and because you live in a non-static environment, okay, the Earth is, for lack of a better term, whether it's a ball that inexplicably exists that has a moon that inexplicably is the same size as the sun, even though the one is 138,000 miles away versus 93 million miles away, but from our vantage point, they're the exact same size, which completely, that is really not possible that would even happen. or it's a point that all creation started with a point and extended to a line. The line opened up into a Vesca Pisces like an eyeball, and everything here is a big flat disc, and it's all part of God's grand design. Or it's all a gigantic simulation. Any one of those three religions, you could pick one, and everything I'm talking about would still apply. And it would say, like, this is a non-static environment. It changes all the time, which is actually kind of nice. It gives you an opportunity to constantly be playing the game and not always winning. You, again, like I said, you would not want to win all the time. That would be hell. We've discussed that here. I think about last year I did a live stream where we actually discussed that. That was an actual main topic. was the Twilight Zone episode, A Nice Place to Visit. If you have not seen that episode, I strongly recommend you watch it tonight. Go and look it up. I think it's free on several different streaming services. It might be free on YT for all I know. But if you haven't seen that episode, you should watch it. In fact, not only should you watch it twice and study it and understand exactly the message that the author is explaining. Because yes, it's a Twilight Zone episode TV show, but that's actually a literary device. And I don't remember where exactly, I think it was written by Rod Serling himself, either him or Charles Beaumont that wrote that episode. And that's a thought process that's existed for a long time of, like, what would hell actually be like? It would be winning and nonstop and never anything changing and never anything being difficult. That would actually not be good. You would not want that. That's why it's called A Nice Place to Visit. I recommend you watch it. It's a great episode. But yeah, I mean, to answer that question, I suppose, if that's what you meant, it comes from being comfortable with losing. Think of it like this. There's another good example. I'll use another literary or a fictional example. I'll use a movie example. There's an old movie with Mel Gibson and Jodie Foster called Maverick. That's what it was, right? There's this scene in which Maverick shows up at this card game and he says, "Hey, I want to, Matt, do you mind if I join the game?" And the Spaniard says, "I like the game the way it is." So he ups the ante and he says, "All right, if you let me join the game, I promise I will lose for an hour at least." Well, and of course, he's basically kind of buys his way into the game by promising to lose the entire time. And he does. He keeps his word. He loses the entire time. There's a philosophy to that. If you really understand, like, if you really take the time to understand this for just a second here, if you're comfortable with losing, right, and you're going to do it, it frees you up to study exactly what you're doing. It frees you up to study how they're winning. Make sense? Right? And that's exactly what he tells them. He later on, he just tells the truth. He says, "Why do you think I lost for an hour? It's so that I don't have to worry about trying to win. I can learn your tells. I can learn everything about you people, so that way when I do win, I'm able to really clean up because I don't have to worry about losing." When you get to that kind of moment, you stop being afraid of well, I've never done something, so therefore I don't want to do it. I've never let that stop me before. I mean, when I first started, I don't usually tell this story. When I first started my first restaurant, I didn't even have a dough recipe. It didn't even have a recipe, and yet, we were like 2 days from opening, and I had to just conjure all this stuff up. You never let that kind of stuff stop you. And when you're used to that kind of thing, and you're able to do it very gracefully, after a while, you end up. Everybody else starts moving in slow motion around you. I don't know if that makes any sense. That's how it feels. Everybody else is moving like 10 steps behind you, and you're not even really trying. It's not like you're trying to be faster or better or anything like that. It's just that you are comfortable with that. And when you're comfortable with something like that, you get to that level. And the only way that you will ever get to, and this is just my opinion, you do whatever you want to try, but this is my opinion. I think the only way that you'll ever get to that is by going out and actually doing stuff. There is no book you will read. There is no college class you will ever take. There is no MBA class that will ever tell you any of this. There isn't anywhere in the world, to my knowledge, that you will hear somebody tell you, like, I have the secret of all this. If you do all this, you're going to be. No. If you want this kind of power, then you have to be willing to go out into the world and actually get your head kicked in and be okay with it. And then say, okay, now we can actually turn things around. So this is, that's kind of how it works. I mean, I could use fictional literary example after. I could just go on and on about this. But I mean, there's so much truth to that. and it happens a lot throughout, just throughout your life. Once you get comfortable with that and you're not afraid, it changes the way that you see the world, and you become less fearful of almost everything. It's kind of a strange feeling because you don't fear very much anymore, and it just changes the way you see it. And so if that's what you meant, if that's what you were talking about, that's where it comes from. Thank you so much. Hold on. My little thing here went crazy on me. Everyone says rates are terrible in trucking. They are. What's your experience? Good. That's not good. If you want, I'll briefly touch on the trucking thing for those of you that are truck drivers. The rates are pretty bad when you figure that the amount of money that you are making on a load, if you were to lose one tire on the way, you get a tire blowout, how much of that load would you lose on that one tire? In some cases, all of your profit would be gone completely on one tire. That's pretty bad. When rates are that bad that like one blowout knocks out every bloody penny of profit that you would have made on that load, that's pretty bad. And that's only one tire, let alone any other mechanical problems. Because anybody who owns trucks, how this works. The maintenance is constant. It's never ending. You are always fixing something. There is always something to do. There isn't a time there isn't something that needs to be lubricated, needs to be replaced, needs to be gone through, needs to be updated. I mean, it's never ending. And that's not including updating the equipment. That's just maintaining the existing equipment that you have without buying new stuff. And when the rates are so low that people are unable, I'm seeing that, like, just look at the number of trucks on the side of the road nowadays. The number of trucks on the side of the road nowadays that I see, it's constant. I've seen more trucks on the side of the road now than I've probably ever seen as a driver in the last 15 years. I mean, there's tons of trucks breaking down because guys can't afford to maintain them anymore. They're just driving them until they basically explode. They're just driving them until the truck just gives up. And then they call the Loves guy or the TNA guy. They come out there and it's 5 times the more money to try and fix it than what it would have been if they maintained before. But they can't because they don't have the money. They're trying to pay all their bills. They're rotating credit cards and stuff. It's really horrible. I listen to the repost of every single video you make. Yep. Yeah. And like I said, I will repost this. Thank you so much. Sorry, it's because you see the illusion. I enjoy watching you. Thanks for your help. Oh, you're welcome. I mean, anytime. Let's see here. Yeah, so that one. How are you doing? I'm doing well as I can be under circumstances. I mean, as I said in the very, very beginning of this video, of this live stream, that it's been an interesting 3 weeks. Grace under pressure. Yeah, I mean, I suppose so. A lot of it comes from just because I don't have an agenda. There's nothing for me to sell you. I'm not trying to hype you on anything. I'm not trying to hustle you. So, there's no. So if you don't have an agenda and you're not trying to hustle people and you're not trying to get something from them, then you can be honest. And if you're being honest, then there's really nothing to be under pressure over. Does that make sense? Gotta run. Appreciate you. Yep. I do too. I'm kind of cleaning this up and then I actually gotta go. Hold on here. And number 8 in the fan club. There's a fan club? You guys started a fan club? Who did this? I didn't know you could do that. Admire, respect it. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you. That's very, very nice of you to say. Anyway, so I think that'll do it. It's been 2 hours or so, so I appreciate all of you guys that showed up. And we will see you next time. If I'm still around next week, I'll try and do 6 o'clock next Saturday if I can do it and stuff. I'll let you guys know. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye.